Maran writes in the Shulchan Aruch, chapter Mem Zayin, 47 in Orach Chaim, Dinei Birkat HaTorah, the laws of the blessings on the Torah. Now, let's read together. Birkat HaTorah, the blessing on the Torah. Tzarich lizaher ba. No. You have to be very careful about it. What does it mean you have to be very careful about it?
You have to pronounce it slowly and clearly.
Let's read this together. Underlined, Chayav Adam levarech Birkot HaTorah b'chol yom. A person must recite the blessings of the Torah every day. Now, notice it says here Birkot HaTorah, the blessings of the Torah, and Maran writes Birkat HaTorah, the blessing of the Torah. Maran refers to this blessing as ba, it, her, means singular. So that's how we know it's Birkat HaTorah. Here, he's referring to plural, Birkot HaTorah. וצריך להיזהר בברכות אלו מאוד. A person has to be very careful about these ברכות. ואסור ללמוד תורה קודם שיברך ברכות התורה. It's forbidden for a person to learn any Torah whatsoever unless they first say the blessings over the Torah. So it's early in the morning, you came to the Beit Knesset, for whatever reason you didn't say Birkot Torah. Someone comes and asks you a halachic question, are you allowed to answer them? No. Why? You didn't yet say the morning, the bracha on the Torah. Let's 371. Let's read the Rashi script here. Ken kadvu HaTorah v'Shulchan Aruch kan. Both the Torah and Maran write that you have to be very particular about this blessing. Lizaher ba. Why? Ayin ben Darim. Look in Masech Nedarim that it says in page 81a. Mipnei ma talmidei chachamim. Why is it that talmidei chachamim en mitzuim latzet mibnehem talmidei chachamim? Why is it that you see talmidei chachamim and their children are not talmidei chachamim? A rabbi's answer: mipnei she'enam mevarchim b'Torah techila. Because they are not particular about saying the blessing over the Torah first. Now, although there are many, many interpretations and understandings of this teaching here, the main idea is that there is a direct connection between the blessing of the Torah and whether or not one's children will come out to be Talmidei Chachamim. ואמרו שם על הפסוק על מה אבדה הארץ ויאמר אדוני על עוזבם את תורתי. Why was the land destroyed? Because they abandoned my Torah. Say Chachamim שלא חרבה ארץ ישראל. The land of Israel was only destroyed because the Jews did not recite the blessings over the Torah first. Look at the Ran, what he explains in the name of Rabbeinu Yonah. And look at what the commentaries all write about these teachings over Bet Yosef, over Prisha, over Bach, over Taz, over Pri Megadim, over Shul Tav Sofer, over Shul God Moshe. HaShamayim, so let's just say, first and foremost, though we might not have clarity as to this agadic teaching of page 371. Yeah. Let's look on the left column on page 371. Hidem ben Darim, in Masech Nedarim, Pirshu HaRabbis explain מה שנאמר על מה אבדה הארץ ויאמר אדוני לעוזבם את תורתי. The Jewish people left my Torah, that's why the land was destroyed. The Hainu shel bichu b'Torah techila. They did not recite the blessing over the Torah first. Upirshu Haran, and the Ran explained, v'kamim rabotenu harishonim sham, and some of our early rabbis. The Hainu shelamdu belo levarech techila b'Birkot Torah. They learned Torah without first reciting the blessings of the Torah. Umuchach, and you see from there, sheyesh isur b'davar lilmod Torah belo levarech techila b'Birkot Torah. That there is a prohibition of learning Torah without reciting the blessings of the Torah first. והפרי חדש כתב, he writes, להוכיח מכאן, to prove from here, שברכות התורה מן התורה. The blessings of the Torah, the blessings we recite before reading the Torah, are biblically required. וכן כתבו בשו"ת שאגת אריה, and he writes similarly in שאגת אריה, והגאון יעבץ, באורקציה, אולם הרמב"ם. So these Chachamim, they're of the opinion that Birkot Torah are biblically required. Ulam harambam b'shut Perador, but the Rambam in his letters, very interesting letters, these Perador, they're put out a number of different editions. The rabbi who wrote this book put out his own edition of the Rambam's letters, in which he writes many valuable footnotes on the bottom. פירש בעניין אחר, דהיינו שלא נהגו כבוד בתלמידי חכמים העוסקים בתורה, לברך ראשונים בסדר העונים לתורה. The Rambam understands this teaching of our rabbis very differently. You recall one Shabbat afternoon, we were sitting in the big Beit HaKnesset, and I said, let's read some Shulchan Aruch that nobody ever reads. And we spoke about the order of who goes up to reading the Torah first. And in people's minds, who goes up to read the Torah first? A Kohen. And next, a Levi. And next, Israel. And that's how it continues. What about a Talmid Chacham? Very good. What was that? Baruch. So I mentioned there that really a Talmid Chacham should go first. Of what value is a Kohen who's an ignoramus? Yeah? Meaning, a Kohen is a Kohen, a born a Kohen. Good. But a Talmid Chacham is more than a Kohen. If you see a Kohen Gadol who's an ignoramus drowning in a river, and you see a Talmid Chacham who is a mamzer, born out of an illegitimate relationship, and is not allowed to marry most other Jews, who do you say first? A Talmid Chacham. The Kohen Gadol is nice, but he's an Am Haaretz. The Talmid Chacham comes first. It doesn't make a difference whether he's born from a normal marriage or not. And so this Rambam explains to us that the reason why the land was destroyed was because the Jewish people did not bless Talmidei Chachamim first, meaning they did not allow the Talmidei Chachamim to take the Aliyot first, and instead they gave them in whatever order they thought they should give out the Aliyot.
So you're saying that this, is it a minhag? Kohen, Levi?
Assuming that we're all of equal standing, so Kohen and a Levi should go first. If it's a whole room of Talmidei Chachamim, a Kohen and a Levi go first. But if not, if the Israel is a Talmid Chacham, I can tell you that by Chacham Ovadia Yosef, he always took the first Aliyah. That's what I heard. I didn't pray with him, so I can't tell you. That's what I heard. והובא תשובת הרמב"ם בשיטה מקובצת, וכן פירש רבנו יהודה על ברצלוני, guess where he's from? וכן פירש המהרש"א. And so a number of different Chachamim understand that it's not that the Jewish people didn't recite the blessings first. It's they did not allow Talmidei Chachamim to recite the blessing over the Torah first. And that's why the land was destroyed. Nonetheless, regardless of how you read this, I'm skipping a few lines of the wide lines in the middle, where there's a little Rashi bit. Whether or not you're allowed to learn Torah before you recite the blessing over the Torah, and מדברי הרמב"ם ראיה להתיר או לאסור. You can't use the Rambam's words to prove for or against. אולם מדברי הרמב"ן בהשגותיו לספר המצוות הוא מוכח לידיעה שסובר שיש איסור לעסוק בתורה קודם שיברך ברכות התורה. So as much as the Rambam is neutral, the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, he says there's a prohibition to learn Torah before you recite blessings first. וכן כתב בהדיעה בספר חינוך. In the book of the Chinuch, he writes explicitly, שאם עוסק בתורה קודם שיברך ברכות התורה, that someone who learns Torah in the morning before they recite the blessings of the Torah, bitel mitzvat midoraita. He violated or lost out on performing a biblical mitzvah. On the next page, וכן כתב הראש בפירושו על נדרים, and he continues and continues and continues with a number of different chachamim who say similar things. On the top of page 372, ולדעת רבים מרבותינו ראשונים ואחרונים, in the opinion of the majority of our great rabbis, the early ones and later ones. Amirat Birkot HaTorah kodem limud Torah hi mitzvat aseh min HaTorah. Reciting the blessing before learning Torah is a biblical mitzvah. Ulam nedat HaRambam u'Maran HaShulchan Aruch v'Rabim HaPoskim enam elam derabanan. But according to the Rambam, Maran, and the majority of the other poskim, it's only a rabbinic prohibition. V'chen halacha, and that's the halacha. So many poskim say that the blessing over the Torah before you learn Torah is biblically mandated. Rambam, Maran, and many poskim say that it's not. Who do we follow the halacha? Maran. Yeah, we follow Shulchan Aruch. Correct? What difference does it make if a blessing is biblically mandated or rabbinically mandated? Say it. Okay, if you don't do it, fine. What else?
It's more obligatory.
Okay, so you're more obligated. Give me a practical case.
Doesn't it also affect how lenient or what leniency we can take? In other words, if something is biblically prohibited and there's two opinions, we have to take the more strict opinion, and if it's rabbinic, then we can take the more lenient opinion. Right.
So I'm asking you for an example of that. Practically, that's a good point. I'm asking for a practical example of that. Let's read the next line. V'lachen, and therefore, im nistapek, if you're not sure, im berech Birkot HaTorah, you say the morning blessings on autopilot, and you don't remember where you stopped. Is that a good thing to do? No, but you don't remember if you said the blessings or not. You don't remember. If it's a biblically required blessing, then you go back and recite the blessing again. Because when in doubt as to a biblical mitzvah, you're strict. But if it's a rabbinic mitzvah, then you'd be lenient, and therefore you don't go back and recite the blessing. Like other blessings, aside from which other blessing do you recite that's biblical? Birkat HaMazon. Very good. Milvad Birkat HaMazon.
If you forgot and you say it again, it's not counted as a bracha in vain? You say you shall not take Hashem's name.
So let's say you said it, you forgot you said it, and then you said it again. If it's biblically required, the second blessing is not in vain, because that's what halakha requires you to do. But if it's rabbinically mandated, then the second bracha is in vain.
So then you know it's, of course, you have to remember which one is it's biblical or rabbinic.
Yeah, that's the practical ramification. Is it biblical or is it rabbinic? Now I will tell you that Rav Peretz is very strict about the blessings of the Torah. Whatever the Rambam and Maran said, they said. But it's still an important thing to treat these blessings. There is a safek. Many poskim say that the blessings that you say over the Torah are biblically required. And to treat them as such. But there's another solution. Let's say you forgot to say Birkot HaTorah, but you didn't yet pray Shacharit. What blessing do you recite right before Shema Yisrael in the morning? Baruch Ata Hashem Hamvarech Et Amo Yisrael Be'ava. Thank you, Hanan. That blessing, Avat Olam, that you recite in the morning, yes? That blessing technically counts as a blessing over the Torah, no? That blessing counts as a blessing over the Torah, and therefore you can have in mind the blessing that you say before Shema counts as your blessings of the Torah that you're not sure if you said or you didn't say earlier. If you look on the top of page 374, it's an interesting quote from Maran Shulchan Aruch. It's good for you to know. Maran Shulchan Aruch ketav. Maran Shulchan Aruch writes, top right column. Kol haberachot, all of the blessings. Im nistapek im berach im lav. If you're not sure whether you recited them or not, eno mevarech, you do not repeat them. Lo betechila velo basof. Not in the beginning, not the end. Chutz min Birkat HaMazon, except for the blessing over Birkat HaMazon, mipnei shehi shel Torah, because it is a biblically required blessing. So according to Maran, which other blessing do you repeat if you're not sure? Birkat HaMazon. What else? Nothing else, right? Not in the Torah. I mean, Maran doesn't accept that blessing is a biblical requirement.
Did they look at different sources like evidence?
Yeah, there's a lot of this. If you notice how long the footnotes are on page 370, 372, 373, it's all about that. On the top of page 376, Maran tells us, Tzarich levarech. You must recite the blessings of the Torah, ben lemikra, whether you are studying mikra. What is mikra?
They're reading the Torah.
Reading any text of the Tanakh. It's called mikra. It's a mistake that we don't use that word, mikra. But Sephardim, I don't think they ever use the word Tanakh. I mean, maybe today everyone uses it. But mikra means that which is written, the writings. Mikra. Yes? And the Mishnah uses the word mikra whenever it refers to the Tanakh. The Karaim get their name from mikra. Kra is the Kara'i. That's where they get the word from. How did they get that word and we ended up with, what do we get? Yehuda. What's so special about being Yehudim? It's an interesting title. We chose 1/12 of the people to name ourselves after. Ben the Mishnah. Whether you are learning Mishnah, so it doesn't make a difference if you're studying a biblical teaching or rabbinic teaching, ben a Talmud or Talmud, Hagan, notice the Rama adds in, ben a Midrash. Whether you are studying Midrash. Now, is Maran excluding Midrash for a reason? Not necessarily. Don't get stuck on Maran not saying Midrash. Yeah? You can learn something from there. You could possibly infer that for Maran, learning was made up of Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud. Midrash is like a side thing that you do. By the Ashkenazim, though, it's important. You can read that into this. Maran is telling you whether the learning you're learning is biblical, or it's rabbinic, it's early, or it's later. All Limud Torah requires a blessing before it. HaKotev b'divrei Torah. What if you're writing divrei Torah? What does that mean, HaKotev b'divrei Torah? Okay, so that could be the most literal. You're writing a Torah, you're writing a mezuzah, you're writing tefillin. Give me another example. Yeah, you're writing notes of your shiur, you're writing a letter to another Talmid Chacham, whatever it is. Afal pi she'eno koreh, even though you're not actually verbalizing anything, tzarich levarech. You have to recite the blessing first. The poskim seem to say that if you just think about Torah, you can do that before you say the blessings. Writing is it's an action, but speaking. Hameharher b'divrei Torah. Look at the next halakha. What?
How many times a day you say this?
Once in the morning. Hameharher b'divrei Torah. Somebody who thinks about divrei Torah. Eno tzarich levarech. Maran says does not have to recite a blessing. Says the Rama, v'hu hadin diachol lifsok din b'lo nitinat ta'am lidvarav. The Rama adds a very interesting thing. A rabbi who is asked a halachic question is allowed to answer the halachic question before they say the blessing of the Torah, as long as they don't explain the logic behind their halachic ruling. Can I do this on Shabbat? Yes. Explain to me why. Because the Torah says no. Now you're already learning Torah. If you ignore the part of the logic, how you reached your conclusion, that's one thing. But to just answer the question, a chacham is allowed to answer. That's what the Rama says. Does Maran disagree? I don't think so. Rama is adding here a note that Maran didn't mention in the Shulchan Aruch. 379. Maran writes, what is the blessing that you recite over the Torah? Birkot Torah, the blessings are Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah v'ha'areh v'na Adonai Eloheinu divrei Torah. This is already...
Yeah, I know this.
Of course, yeah. This is in the morning, and then you say v'asher bachar banu. There's a second blessing, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato Baruch. Oh, very good. So, this blessing, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, is a fundamental part of learning Torah. We were chosen from the nations of the world. This is a fact. V'natan lanu et Torato. And he gave us his Torah. Who else did he give his Torah to? To nobody. Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha Kehillat Yaakov. One day the Jewish people will get upset at cultural appropriation of our religion. Until then, we say it in a bracha. Asher natan lanu Torato. Yeah, Asher bachar banu mikol v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Hashem noten Torah. These are the blessings we recite over the Torah. Maran writes in the next halakha, page 380, Omer v'ha'arevna im vav. You say v'ha'arevna, and please let the Torah be sweet. And, you say the word and, as opposed to just ha'arevna. Says the Rama, v'yesh omerim belo vav. Some say without a vav, v'chen hagun. That's the custom in Ashkenaz. Aval yoter tov lomar bevav. But it's better if you can say vav to say vav. It's a classic Ashkenazi commentary here. Many say without a vav. That's the custom. It's not right. You should do it the other way, but what are you going to do? The custom already is the custom. It's very interesting.
That have implications for talking about in terms of alphabetic and getting things
Precise.
in the grammar.
Well, let's be honest, the vav has to do with whether or not you believe this blessing is made up of two parts or it's made up of one part. Vav connects, and the word and connects two things one with the other. So let's look at the notes here for a minute. The Sfaradim, we say Asher Kedeshanu Tzivanu al Divrei Torah, on the words of the Torah. If you look at the top of page 380, Uminhag Ashkenazim, the Ashkenazim say La'asok B'divrei Torah. Can someone give me an Ashkenazi Siddur? Here, the blue one's over there, behind you over there. That's okay. First, the Siddur. They don't know they moved. Yeah.
Especially since no one's got a total blackout screen.
You know, I debate whether picking on people for not having their cameras on or not. On one hand, I understand you're home, it's private, it's late at night. Some people are on the East Coast, they don't want to show their face. But I would never attend a shiur with my camera off. I wouldn't go. I'd rather just skip it. I find it to be rude beyond belief. So here, it says, Ashkenazim say, Asher kedeshanu v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei. They have it here, Sorah, with a s. Yes? According to the Ashkenazim, the blessing here is la'asok b'divrei Sorah. Sorah. Now you know the rule. What are the rules of Beged Kefet?
יש בראש מילה.
Yeah. Now the question is, Torah berosh milah? Taf berosh milah?
תף, not a סף.
But it's bedivrei Torah.
That's a smichut. That's called smichut. Pass to the next one.
So then the taf could be a saf, no? I say I'm not an expert in Ashkenazi grammar. V'arev na Hashem Elokeinu divrei sorasecha. It says sorasecha. And I've heard Ashkenazim say sorasecha. So I've never heard an Ashkenazi say la'asok b'divrei Sorah. I never heard it in my life. And I prayed a long time with Ashkenazim, different places, different communities, different sidurim. Even though it's what it says in their sidur. But when it says sorasecha, I've heard them say sorasecha. It's interesting. Okay. You know, Chevra, in German, the T becomes an S. Like water in English and German is with a S. So it doesn't. Don't blame somebody that their accent became S. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, Negelwasser. That's what it Wasser is, water. Rabotenu Arishonim Nechteku, our early rabbis debate, or they argue, if v'harev na is a blessing on its own, meaning are there 3 blessings in Birkot Torah, or just 2 blessings? The Sfaradim, as usual, like I told you the other night, they follow the Arizal, and therefore they break up these blessings into 3 blessings. And the real difference is going to be how many times you answer Amen if you heard somebody else say these blessings. Would you answer it twice or would you answer it 3 times? Being that I don't know the last time you heard somebody else say these blessings, you're welcome to look up the footnotes on your own. A few other variations. Yeah.
Birkot HaTorah, we say amen every time someone says it.
Yeah. Like any blessing. You hear somebody say it, you say, yes. Yes. On page 383, Birkat va'arevna, in the blessing of Arevna, yesh noagim lomar, befinu u'befifiyot amecha bet Yisrael. Yes? And that is the custom of the Sephardim. V'yesh ma'ashkenazim, and some of the Ashkenazim, they say, uvefi or uvefiyot amecha bet Yisrael. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong way, those are just slight discrepancies. I checked last time for you, I told you I was going to check the Spanish-Portuguese Siddur, and they don't say the blessing of Hanoten Le'ef Koach, like Maran. So they're probably the only Sephardic Siddur that still has the blessings according to Maran. Uminhag Sephardim lomar, and the custom of the Sephardim is to say, V'niyeh anachnu, v'tze'etzaenu, and it should be us and our descendants, v'tze'etzaenu, and the descendants of our descendants, v'tze'etzae amecha bet Yisrael, and the descendants of all of your nation Israel. Some of them are missing that last phrase. You should fix the Siddur and add it back in. And some of the Ashkenazim say, they're missing the second. They don't say that part, they just say the first and the third part. The Sephardim say, that's what they say in your school, right? The Sephardim say 1, 2, and 3 parts. So, tzetzeinu, tzetzeinu, v'tzetzei amecha bet Yisrael. Everybody.
I know our motivation is beseeching the Kodesh Baruch Hu. If there's something having in common with the idea of an affirmation, where you create a positive mindset for blessing, health, and future generations, and passing on.
Tefillah, no?
Yeah, you're creating a space for these things to happen, and you have to really put energy into that, and it has an influence.
There are a number of places in our tefillot where the Chachamim tell us to focus on our children. The Mekubalim, for example, have a place in Az Yashir Moshe, right? Az Yashir Moshe Bnei Yisrael. There, when you say Tivi'emo v'tita'emo, when you should bring them and plant them into the mountain of Hashem. To plant them, have in mind, your children shouldn't just be brought to the mountain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they should be stuck there. That's where they should stay. And there's a kavanah there to have in mind that your children also should be included.
Rabbi Yoni?
Yes.
Ashkenaz, but it has the repetition. It has repetition.
Does it have it in parentheses?
Yes.
Okay. So that's why he writes V'yesh Mashkenazim, some of the Ashkenazim, because you're right. For example, the Bach, he says that you should say V'tzetzei tzetzeinu. So a number of Ashkenazim say yes, some say no. If you look in the note in the bottom left of page 383, the Gemara in Bava Metzia says, Kol haro'eh beno uven beno osek b'Torah. If anybody sees their son and the son of their son, meaning you see your grandchildren, osek b'Torah, learning Torah, muftach lo shena Torah poseket mizaro. There's a guarantee for you that your descendants will not stop learning Torah. You find by the Chachamim 3 times of anything is very powerful. You know, there's always the 3-threaded rope will not quickly be ripped. It's stronger than 2. I think 3 is a chazakah. I mean, you do things 3 times, they're important. Seeing 3 generations do something is obviously not a foolproof promise, but it's if you manage to get 3 generations on the same path, then likely this is already it's a snowball effect. It's an avalanche that's happening. It's going to be very hard to derail 3 generations of something. Is it a promise? Absolutely not. Baruch Hashem is not a promise, because you've seen people that 3 generations were away from the Torah and were able to come back. So thank God this is not written in stone. In both directions, there's a benefit and a maybe not such a great benefit, but both of them work hand in hand together. L'ifnei chatimat beracha, and right before, on page 384, right before we finish the beracha, we say, V'lomedei Toratecha lishma, learn the Torah lishma, for the sake of learning Torah. As opposed to, what kind of benefit does a person get for learning Torah?
Money, a name, smarter than anybody else.
Money, fame, I'm waiting for this. Smarter than other people, also not happening. I'm in a better Knesset full of engineers. Meaning, the idea is you're not learning the Torah for ulterior motives. There are people who learn Torah for ulterior motives.
It says you should not use the Torah
As a shovel. Torah, people stand up for you, people kiss your hand. What is honor? Honor is all fake anyways. So this is like a shortcut. People respect rabbis in some way. I don't know if they really respect rabbis. I've yet to... I've experienced real respect of Talmidei Chachamim, but for the most part, when people respect rabbis, it's like they respect any other clerk who does their will. And when the clerk doesn't do their job, they get fired. And this kavod, money, yeah, if a person get a good job as a rabbi. There are rabbinic jobs. They may not be part of Shivitis, but rabbinic jobs. I know a rabbi who makes $350,000 a year with a house in Manhattan, paid for, a car for him and his wife, a trip to Israel every year for 2 weeks, tuition for his children in Jewish school, family life cycle events like Brit, Bar Mitzvah, weddings covered for by the Kehillat. Why bother going for years and years and years and opening up your own practices or professions? Or you can do it being a rabbi. And today, to be a rabbi, you don't have to know anything. Used to be a rabbi, you had to know something. Today, usually a piece of paper. That piece of paper, anybody can get it. Some places, 10 months a pop. You get your piece of paper and you grow your beard long enough and Shalom Israel, you can take any job you want. Some places, they don't even want you to have a beard. So you get rid of your beard and they give you the job. You just do whatever it takes to get that job. And then, Baruch Hashem. So you make sure I learn Torah for the sake of learning Torah. Why am I learning? Just to learn Torah. I'd love to learn HaKadosh Baruch Torah. Uv'chatimat beracha, and when sealing the beracha, there once has a famous Ashkenazi rabbi, the Or Sameach, Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. They asked him, what about a person who loves learning Torah so much that they learn Torah for their ulterior motive of joy? They just get so much joy from learning Torah. And he said, that's the whole point. Like everyone's supposed to reach a place where they learn Torah out of joy. So if it makes you so happy, so you could, wow, Baruch Hashem, I reached the place of learning Torah. People used to think that you have to learn Torah and suffer from learning Torah. Because if I like it, then it will be not for the sake of heaven. There's a breed of Lithuanian Jews like that. They don't study any practical side of the Torah. They only study things, obscure halachot about the Beit HaMikdash and sacrifices. And why? Because if any halakha that you study is useful to you, then now you're learning Torah for an ulterior motive. That's what they believe. It's very foolish, but that's what they believe. So they will never, ever, if they have to have a choice, they will never study Torah that is actually useful.
It's a mitzvah to improve yourself and purify yourself and become a better human being. That's for the benefit of everyone in Torah.
Isn't the purpose of the Torah to know how to follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu's way? So if you're learning Torah in a way that doesn't help you, it doesn't fix you, it doesn't improve you, and it doesn't tell you what to do, so then what's the point of learning it? It shouldn't surprise you then that out of these groups of Jews come the greatest anarchists of the Jewish people. Because at the end of the day, their study of Torah is an intellectual pursuit. The study of Torah is not a submission to the creator of the universe, to the Chachamim that guided us in the Torah. Something to think about. But in the cloak of Torah. V'chatimat beracha nohagim lomar, and in the end of the blessing they say, Baruch Ata Hashem hamelamed Torah la'amo Yisrael, who teaches Torah to the Jewish people. 385, the custom of the Sephardim is to say Birkot Torah after all of the morning blessings. In the Ashkenazim, they first say the morning blessings after Asher Yatzar. They say them after Birkot HaShachar, or after Asher Yatzar, or after Elohai Neshama, meaning they have a number of different times in which they say these blessings. Hager, what about a person converted to Judaism? Mevarech kol Birkot Torah. They recite all the blessings. V'omer, and they also say, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu Torato, who chose us from all of the nations and gave us his Torah. If you look on the bottom left of that page, Lamed Zayin. Chen katav Rabbeinu HaRambam. I once read to you this letter of Rabbeinu HaRambam to Ovadiah the convert. There's a he calls him Rabbi Ovadiah.
Where his rabbi said say these brachot.
That's right.
And then he checked it to Rabbi.
That's right. His rabbi was making fun of him in public. Yeah, and he wrote to Rambam a letter, and the Rambam says, not only can you, but you must recite these berachot. Let me read to you. It's actually the words of the Rambam are quite golden. If you look in the bottom left of the page, Lamed Zayin. V'zo leshono. These are the words of the Rambam. So the last sentence on page 385. V'day yesh lecha levarech asher bachar, page 386. Asher bachar banu v'asher natananu. Of course you must recite these blessings. Shekvar bachar becha haboreh. The Creator chose you personally. He's speaking to Rabbi Ovadia Hager. V'ivdilcha min ha'omot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu separated you from the rest of your family, from the rest of the nations. V'natan lecha HaTorah. He gave you the Torah. HaTorah lanu v'lagerim nitna. The Torah was given to us and to all those who would join us over the years. And this is ruled halakha in a number of different places. And so, though there may be those who feel otherwise, the Rambam's opinion is that this bracha is recited by everybody. We are the descendants of Avraham Avinu. But somebody who converts to Judaism is actually the first generation child of Avraham Avinu. So when it comes to going to the Torah, I'm very sad when I see it. I'm sad when I see people who converted to Judaism, they go to the Torah and they say, my name is Ben Avraham, or Bat Sarah. Why are you so afraid to say Ben Avraham Avinu? I know why. Because the Jewish community, they bully people who convert to Judaism. I understand. So nobody wants to be considered a convert to Judaism. Yeah, but that's a ridiculous thing. In my Amidah, 3 times a day, we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Al Tzadikim, Al Chasidim, and we say, Val Gerei HaTzedek. Hashem, place my portion with the righteous, with the pious, and with those who converted to Judaism. 3 times a day we say that bracha with Hashem's name. Let me be like them. So when someone comes with the title, I am the child of Avraham Avinu, who here wouldn't want to spend time with the child of Avraham Avinu? So when to go to the Torah, when you write a ketubah, why hide the Avinu part? You're not just a child of any Avraham. There are a lot of Avrahams in the street. Avraham Avinu. It's only a twisted feeling that can lead a person to want to renounce the one thing that is the greatest claim to fame, that they might have over anybody else in the Jewish community. Listen, my parents are not too shabby, but they're still not Avraham Avinu. They would agree with you also. They're not Avraham Avinu. If you write in a person's ketubah, the child of Avraham, the ketubah is pasul. It's not a kasher ketubah. Yeah. So Ashkenazim, they sometimes write before, they write the word Gior, or Giota, or Giora. They write in the beginning, it's a convert, Ben Avraham. Why? I see Ben Avraham Avinu. By Sephardim, we write Ben Avraham Avinu Alav Shalom. A blessing, peace be upon him. It's an honorary title, Ben Avraham Avinu. I once did a chuppah, and they asked me to write the name of Avraham Avinu in acronym. Aleph, Aleph, Ayin, Hey. I still suffer from that. Page 386. Birkat Ahavat Olam. The blessing of Ahavat Olam that we say before Shema, poteret Birkat HaTorah im lamad miyad beli hefsek. If you learn Torah immediately after Ahavat Olam, then it includes your limud Torah. Why? It has all the words about allow me to learn and to teach and to study. And therefore, $387. V'yesh listapek, says Maran, we have to wonder. Isage bekoreh kriyat shema samuch lamiyad b'li hefsek. V'lachen yesh lizaher lever birkat haTorah kodem ahavat olam. You have to wonder whether or not Shema Yisrael counts as learning Torah right after you said the blessing of Ahavat Olam. So, it's better to say the blessings of the Torah and Ahavat Olam and then Shema. Don't rely on Ahavat Olam. But if for whatever reason, like we mentioned earlier, a person forgot, then you can rely on the blessing of Ahavat Olam.
In the dot.
Yeah?
That replaces
The blessing of the Torah. Sure, there's a few things like this. In the Sephardic community, when we sing Tzumi shelo achanu barechu emunah esavanu, this song was written to replace Birkat HaMazon. it has all of the blessings of Birkat HaMazon in it, though not in proper Baruch Atah Hashem formula, but it's all there. It's for that reason that the Gaon of Vilna, for example, didn't allow people to sing that song before Birkat HaMazon. He was afraid that once you sing that song, you could no longer say Birkat HaMazon because you had already fulfilled the mitzvah of Birkat HaMazon. He would be horrified that in most Sephardic communities, we wait until Birkat HaMazon to say that first. The same idea with Sephardi, Bendiga Mozal Altissimo. This is a translation of Birkat HaMazon, not into Ladino, into Spanish. This is a translation, some say because of the Inquisition or other things. It's very common that in the local vernacular, whatever language people spoke, they would write a Birkat HaMazon, so men are obligated, women are obligated, children are obligated. Not everyone knows how to read Hebrew, not everyone understands Hebrew. So to be able to say a Birkat HaMazon that is in a language that people can understand, that's the purpose of these types of tefillot, like Bendigamos or Tzum Mishul Achan.
So, when you say Ein Kelohenu, the little section of Talmud you say before and then after, is that to fulfill the mitzvah of learning a certain amount of Torah every day? What about the different types of candle wax on Shabbat?
Right. Some of those things are intended to do that also. That's right. To fill in at least a bare minimum of Limud Torah. Though if you just pray them and don't learn them, I wonder whether that counts as... Yes, we saw that praying words of Torah still require a blessing before, according to Sfaradim, but does it really remove you of your obligation? That's a good question. 395. Yesh omrim, some say. 395. What happened to 387? Yeah, you could do all the footnotes on your own time. Yesh omrim. Some say. I know what page I'm on. 395. I read that already. 395. Yesh omrim, some say, she'im hefsik, that if a person interrupted ben birkat Torah limudo en bakach klum, between the Torah reading and the blessing of the Torah and learning, nothing happened. Meaning, some say it's not like you have to say the blessing and immediately study Torah. You could say the blessing. You study Torah when you study Torah. V'anachon, the proper thing is shelo lafsik b'nehem. Don't interrupt between them. V'chen nahagu lomar, parshat birkat kohanim, samuch levirkat Torah. And that's why we say the blessing of the kohanim right after the blessing of the Torah. Right? You ever wonder why after we say noten Torah we say v'daber yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha yair Adonai. Yeah, why do we say that? To learn Torah right after you say the blessings of the Torah.
Well, why that piece?
That's a good one. Why? It's a blessing. Let's see in the footnotes if he tells us why that piece. I feel because the words are beracha, but let's. Here. The reason why 3 psukim, why? Because it's like a person who goes up to the Torah. They read 3 psukim, right? And the second, they chose these specific ones because they have blessings in them.
And you're saying bracha, so it kind of is in the same
Right.
flavor.
Right. And the Ashkenazim very often say right after Elu devarim she'en lehem shua peh v'bikurim v'aran. What do you guys say? Elu devarim
שאין להם שיעור הפה
ביקורים וגמילות חסדים ותלמוד תורה שאדם אוכל פירותיהם בעולם הזה לעולם הבא, ואלו הן וגמילות חסדים אחרית וערבית, הוצאת אורחים וביקור חולים והכנסת כלה, תפילה והבאת שלום בין אדם, תלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. The reason they say that afterwards, כל הכבוד לכם. ברוך השם. The reason they say that afterwards is It's in the Siddur, Zev, come on. The reason they say that afterwards is because that way you include also Mishnah and Talmud. So you say Torah, Mishnah, and Talmud. And then you're kind of covered at the bare minimum that you learned all types of Torah right after you said the blessings over the Torah. Very good. That was a good question. Let's finish up this chapter tonight. Page 396. I'm basically doing all of Maran. You see? 396. Oh, so now you want to open file number 2. It's not there? Refresh the page. So you got number 2 and Zev got number 1 and nobody...
I have number 1. I had number 2 first, and then I got...
It's like you're... It's... So cool what you can do with the Apple, huh? Im hifsik mililmod. What happens if you stopped studying? V'nit'asek ma'asakav. And you went to your work or whatever else you need to do. You went shopping, you went to work. Kivan sheda'ato lachzor v'lilmod lo haveh hifsik. Because you intended to go back to study eventually whenever you get a chance, it's not considered a hifsek, an interruption. V'hu hadin l'shena, the same things with sleeping, u'merchatz, and showering or bathing, u'bet hakiseh, and going to the bathroom. How do you say bathroom in Hebrew? In modern Hebrew, shirutim means, how do you translate shirutim? Yeah, shirut. What is shirut? That's a moni shirut, very good. That's a special kind of taxi. Same word. Why? What does shirut mean? It's a service, like a service room. Yeah. Or they say in Hebrew, they used to say in Old Hebrew, bet shimush. Use, like a room that you use. Chachamim said bet hakiseh, the house of the throne. The house of the chair. That's what that's what it holds in there, a chair. No?
Yeah, sure.
Are you allowed to talk in the bathroom? No, Chachamim, no, you're not speaking at all in the bathroom. Chachamim say, don't talk in the bathroom. In and out. Chachamim say, I was once in a bathroom, I was about to take the kids at SeaWorld or something. Some guy was in there talking to his wife on the phone, like it was the middle, like he was sitting on a park bench. It wasn't normal. But I guess he thinks I'm crazy. Why don't you talk? Like, what's the big deal? It's just a bathroom. This has an exception. Chachamim in the Talmud say there's one exception. Who can talk in the bathroom? Anyone know? Trivia question.
Who can?
Okay, so there's a need, of course. There's one type of person who not can. They should. They're supposed to talk in the bathroom.
A mother to a child.
Close. Women. When women are in the bathroom. Why? In the olden days, it wasn't like today. You had men's bathrooms, women's bathrooms. It was an outhouse over there somewhere. People used to go in there. If you ever seen the Roman outhouses, they're like a big room. Everyone's like, look, they're all sitting around. You ever seen a Roman bathhouse? No. Really?
No.
Let me show it to you. Here. So they would all sit around.
Wait, I can't see.
You see them?
No.
A bunch of holes on chairs. They would sit like that. And people would, I don't know, talk to each other. I don't know what they do over there. That's what they would do. Now, you find archaeology, they're not actually made out of wood. They're made out of stone. So we still have bathhouses like this intact that you can still find. Lo alenu, lo alenu. Have you seen this anywhere else in your life? In concentration camps. When I went to Auschwitz, this is what the bathroom looked like. It was obviously not made out of marble, but everybody was expected to sit on the same row of toilets. Everybody got, I think, 30 seconds in the morning and 30 seconds in the night to go to the bathroom. Never again, not allowed the rest of the day. That's how the Nazis were with them. The worst part of being in Auschwitz, you should know, was not the Nazis. The worst part were the Polish people there. You have to, according to the law, you have to go with a Polish tour guide. they have to be the one to take you to Auschwitz. You can't. Your Jewish tour guide, he has to be a participant. He can't lead you through there. And it's part of a Polish narrative that the Poles suffered just as much as the Jews did during the Holocaust. I'm not here to compare suffering, but I can tell you that from Holocaust survivors that I spoke to who came from Poland, they told me that the Poles were worse to them than the Nazis were. The Nazis killed them because that's the rules they got. And the Poles really hated them. Mamash hated them. The old Holocaust survivor lady that she all of the things about the Nazis, they paled in comparison to the Poles themselves. Were there Poles killed in the Holocaust? Of course. Like any war, people are killed, and people that are opposing political opinions or whatever else. But they shouldn't cry victim after what they did to Am Yisrael. The reason I'm telling you this, so now what happens? A person wants to come into the bathhouse. How does he know whether he can come in and maybe there's a woman there? Or 2 women or 5 women there? So Chachamim instituted that when women are in a bathroom, they should speak. That way from outside, people can hear, now it's a woman's bathroom. Let's wait until they leave, and then we'll go inside so as not to embarrass anybody.
Why didn't they just make men?
So you think, why not have men and women's bathrooms? You should think. Maybe that was very expensive. I don't know what the reason they didn't have that. Or maybe they did have that in big places, but in other places you're traveling along the road, it's just meant for 2 or 3 people at a time. And so because of that, Chachamim instituted that in those types of restrooms, women should make their presence known so that they wouldn't be walked in on by anybody else. That was the idea. That was the halakha. Yes. Random things you learn at a Monday night. 399. Maran writes, Shenat keva bayom al mitato have hefsek. A person who goes to sleep. What's keva? Like a real sleep, not a nap. It's they're going to bed. They work the night shift. So when do they sleep? From 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. There are people like that. I had a student once in Israel. The guy could not get out of bed before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember telling him, you're in yeshiva now. Nobody, whatever. Your parents paid for you to go to Israel for the year. You're wasting your time. That's one thing. Next year you're going to be in college. I'll take night classes. Okay, after college you're going to go to work. I'll work night shift. And his whole head was planned. The guy's not going to see the daylight.
According to circadian rhythms, it shortens your lifetime.
I can only imagine. There are people that this is how they do their whole life. That's called the graveyard shift, right? There are people that's how they work. Says Maran, if you go to sleep like that during the middle of the day, it's a hefsek, meaning when you wake up, you have to recite the blessings all over again. V'yesh omrim, some say they lo have a hefsek, that it's not a hefsek. V'chen hagun, that is the custom. This is interesting. Maran, when he says stam v'yesh, this is the halakha, and there are those who say, which one is his opinion? The first or the second? No, forget the minhag part. When Maran says stam, this is the halakha, and then he says v'yesh, and some say or some do, which one is his opinion? The first one. Very good. When Maran says some say, and then he says and some say, which one is his opinion? The second one, right? The second one. So here, according to the rules of Shulchan Aruch, we would follow the first one. But then Maran adds this qualifying factor, v'chen hagu, that seems to be what the custom is out there. That's how they consider it. They don't consider it a hefsek. That seems to be what people do. I've never heard of somebody. Not telling you that's what Maran would say, but from what I see that people don't. They're not particular about this. Af im lamad balayla. Even if a person learns that's Torah at night. So now, we're learning Torah now. It's nighttime, correct? When did you recite the blessings over the Torah? This morning. Which is really in halakha yesterday. Because today's a new day. Now is already Tuesday. Halayla holech achar hayom she'avar. The night follows the day that just passed. Ve'no tzarich lechazor l'varech kol zman shelo yishen. So long as you don't go to sleep tonight, you don't have to recite the blessings. So if you would go to sleep and wake up for a 2 o'clock in the morning class, could be that 2 o'clock in the morning you have to recite a blessing. But that's a great question. Likely that's still part of your Monday routine, right? So likely that's not going to be a shnat keva. Yeah, but if you were... So even though now is a new day, you don't start all the blessings over again. That's essentially what Maran is telling you. On page 401, Hamashkim kodem or hayom. If a person wakes up before daytime, so before dawn, lilmod, to learn Torah, mevarech birkot Torah. he recites the blessings over the Torah. Ve'eno tzarich lachazor u'levarech shelech lebet hakneset. And you don't need to repeat it again when you go to the Bet HaKnesset. Meaning, the blessings of Torah are not instituted for the synagogue. We say them in the synagogue because usually that's the first place you go once you wake up. But if you're staying at home, you wake up at 4. Do you remember Eli Kahn used to learn with us here? So Eli was always in kollel, almost that shalom. He never missed a kollel. He would always wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And Eli, what do you do? He says he waits. He used to go pray at Chabad at the time, 6:30 shacharit. He said he used to wait 2.5 hours to go pray. Because the earliest minyan was 6:30. Where's he going? You just wait. Sometimes he would do yoga. Sometimes he would go for a walk. Sometimes he would read. Sometimes he would learn. But when does he say Birkot Torah? At 4 o'clock in the morning, not at 6:30 in the morning, because it goes based on when you wake up. You started your day at 4. You start your day at 4. You might only go to the Beit HaKnesset at 6:30. Okay, that's what it is. But you say your Birkot Torah in the morning, whenever is your morning. Yeah. 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 Maybe if you want, it's too early to say Shema, so it's too dark. What point can you start saying Shema? When you can tell from the blue of your tzitzit from the green of the grass, or Ashkenazim call it Mishiaker, Mishiakir. When you could recognize, what else can you recognize? When you can discerning green from blue, or when you recognize your friend, but not your best friend, not somebody who you can recognize a mile away. Somebody like that comes to Beit HaKnesset with you. They're not your best friend. When you can recognize them at a distance and you could tell, oh, I know who that person is, then it's already light enough for you to say Shema. Why do Chachamim give us those measurements? Why not real measurements, like at 4:32 a.m., like the calendar says? Okay, so they could adjust them. They could say it's exactly 6 hours after midnight, or they could. Why don't they fix the time for us? Tell me the halachic times, so you can put on your talit Mashiach, right? You say Shema Yisrael around dawn. You then say at Amidah. When do you say Amidah? In Shema you say when the sky turns blue, right? Netz you say. Netz, when the sun exactly comes up over the horizon. There's a machloket. Some say when the whole ball of the sun comes over the horizon. That's not, we don't accept it. When the beginning of the sun comes over the horizon. Netz, the word netz means litnotzitz, like to sparkle. It sparkles over the horizon. Yes, what time is the middle of the day? How do you calculate the middle of the day? When the sun is straight over your head. So you're standing and there's no shadow around you. What time is midnight, by the way? Exactly 12 hours after midday. So how do you calculate midnight in halakha? By knowing when the middle of the day was. If the midday was at 12:37, you know that at night, 12:37 is going to be night. When do you stop praying mincha? When the sun sets. Yes? When does Shabbat end? Or when do you start praying Arvit? When 3 stars come out. Why all of these? Why not give us, and the clock, all the time, on the calendar, they say, 42 minutes after this, 36 minutes after that. Why? Why don't we just use numbers? Chachamim are good with numbers. They give us dates. They can give us times. They're not connected to reality, is one. That's true. They're also something that an average person can't always calculate on their own. I don't know what 32 minutes after dawn is, but I do know when I see the sun on the horizon. I don't know what exactly the middle of the day are. These 6-hour days, 12 halakha days, numbers change. Doesn't matter. I know right now the sun is over my head. I'm in the field, there's no shadow. Now it's 12:37, write it down. When does Shabbat end? When the stars come out. I can't imagine a calendar. I don't have a watch, I don't have a clock, whatever it is. I know when I see the stars, that's when Shabbat ends. The same thing with measurements on Pesach. People tell me how much matzot you weigh. You have to eat this many pounds, how many ounces, how many grams. Chachamim said the size of an olive, the size of an egg. How much if you eat on Yom Kippur are you violating a biblical prohibition? Always you're violating a biblical prohibition on Yom Kippur, but when is a person liable for the consequences of eating on Yom Kippurim? If they eat the size of a grogeret. You know what a grogeret is? Abba?
Grogeret? The tamar.
Yeah. A grogeret is a dried date.
A good fig.
Fig, Mechila, a fig. A dried fig. How small is a dried fig? Small. Yeah? What if someone tells you, oh, but the figs have changed at the time of the Torah, that they're this big now? What do you tell them? Right. You go fly a kite. The same thing when they tell you, oh, the olives have changed. Which olive has changed? You go down to a museum, and you can find inside of stone fossilized olives from 3,000 years ago. Same exact size olive you have right now. The same with eggs. Nothing changed. Chachamim gave us these measurements because we measure with, for example, tarat mishpacha, halachot, of how a stain, how many barleys. Why? Because everyone has barley in their house. The reason Chachamim gave us measurements so every human being would have access to the Torah. The moment we take away the people's access to their Torah, the moment the Torah becomes in the hands of people who are now in authority, and this becomes a vertical society all over again, and then anybody can be abused because you don't know how to learn halakha. I can tell you what it is. You can't decide for yourself how big it is. Yeah.
I think also because of you're required still to pray and to do all these mitzvot, even when you're traveling, even when you're not somewhere where you might have methods of measurement.
Very good. And so that's exactly the reason. That's the reason. I mean, these are very accessible. Everybody knows them. There's no machloket how big an olive is. There is. I know there is. But there isn't. Everyone knows what size an olive is. Everyone knows what size a chicken egg is. Is it a egg? Is it a large jumbo? Just a chicken egg. Whatever the chicken egg. Yeah. Hamashkim kodem oro hayom on page 403, wrapping up the line. I know what time it is. We're anyways learning tomorrow. Let's not rush this. These are two very important halachot. This last thing that I told you should know is a yisod. It's a foundational piece of the Torah, and that is the Torah is accessible to everybody. When Rambam wrote his Mishneh Torah, why all the ruckus? Why all the complaints? Why? What's the big deal? He wrote a Mishneh Torah. He wrote a halakha book. Big deal. The reason, the chief complaint of him, he was giving access to the people to make decisions without rabbis. Who was upset? The rabbis. The rabbis were upset that someone could question their authority by using a book. Until then, you had to know how to read Tanakh, how to read the Mishnah, the Talmud, you had to understand. Now you could just say, Rabbi, the Rambam says here, why are you telling me that? That still makes rabbis mad, by the way.
Is that why you're so critical of rabbis?
Well, there's a lot of politics that go on in this, what leads up to this. Shulchan Aruch was the same way. He writes in the introduction, Shulchan Aruch was written for school children. To be able, in the olden days it would be, you were sitting in a bedin where, in Yemen, in Morocco, in Turkey, in Egypt, and the rabbi says, hey, this is the halakha. Even Elchanan, who would know how to read Hebrew, would take a Shulchan Aruch and say, hey Rabbi, with all due respect, I'm not questioning your judgment, I just need you to explain to me how what you said fits into what Maran writes over here. And all of a sudden, the rabbi finds himself explaining himself to a 9-year-old. Why? Because that's exactly how every system that has checks and balances work. And you'll notice that whenever a code of Jewish law is issued, there are two camps, those who embrace it, those who value the fact that people have access to education, and there are always those who oppose it. Those who oppose it, we don't follow the Shulchan Aruch. We don't rule like the Rambam. Halakha, you can't learn it from whatever book. Enter the book. It doesn't matter which book. They're always against the books. Why? Because the moment I let you have access is the moment I lose my control over you. Pesach is one of those things. And very good. And this is exactly, it's not a new fight. It's an old fight, and it's not going to die. This doesn't end. These two streams in Judaism have always existed and will always exist, and it's our job, B'ezrat Hashem, to allow one of them to champion over the other. Access to education is what makes empowered people. Empowered people are the greatest servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And robots, they don't work very well. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted robots, He would have created us like He created all the other things in the world that don't think and they don't struggle and that don't have opinions, and they would just like the cow eats grass and the bird flies from tree to tree, we would also do all the mitzvot. That's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a world which had color, which had life, which had vibrancy, and the only way to do that is to allow people to learn and to study and to make those kind of decisions for themselves. B'ezrat Hashem, more tomorrow night. God willing.